This is an audio-only horror story. I want you to close your eyes in. 3, 2, 1, 0. Use your imagination as you listen, and use your imagination to invoke a scene. Enjoy the ride.
My name is Claire Brooks. It was a Tuesday night, and the house was unnaturally quiet. I had just returned home from a long day at work, collapsing onto the couch in the living room, relishing the peaceful solitude. It was one of those rare moments when I was alone, and I intended to enjoy it fully. The silence was a soothing balm after the chaos of the office. The house was a modest, two-story structure on the outskirts of town, with creaky wooden floors and old-fashioned charm. My parents had moved to the suburbs last year, leaving me to look after the place. They had trusted me with this house, and I took that responsibility seriously. Everything was as it should be, except for the unsettling stillness that had settled over the house. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, filling the room with its rhythmic sound. I curled up on the couch with a book, trying to lose myself in its pages. The fireplace crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the room. I was about to turn a page when I heard it, a faint, high-pitched laugh emanating from downstairs. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I turned on the hallway light, casting a warm glow across the room. The house was exactly as I had left it. Nothing was out of place. I checked the living room, the kitchen, and the dining area. Everything was in order, and the laugh was nowhere to be heard. I began to feel foolish. Maybe it had been a figment of my imagination or a trick of the house's creaky old floors. I returned to the living room, trying to dismiss the incident from my mind. Then I heard it again, a soft, childish laugh, louder this time, coming from somewhere near the kitchen. I froze, my heart pounding. The laugh was unmistakable, and it sent a chill down my spine. There was no one else in the house. I was alone. I approached the kitchen with trepidation. The air felt colder as I neared the room, and I noticed the dim light from the street lamp outside casting long shadows through the window. I flicked on the kitchen light, illuminating the space. The kitchen was as I had left it, no signs of anyone having been there. The dishes were still drying on the rack, and the countertop was clear. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The laugh had to be a trick of my imagination, or perhaps the sound had carried from somewhere else. Just as I was about to turn away, I noticed the basement door slightly ajar. It was a heavy wooden door with an old brass handle. The basement was rarely used, mostly for storage. I never went down there much, preferring to keep it locked. A shiver ran down my spine. The basement was a place I avoided, even though I knew it was just an old storage area. The door was slightly open, and I could see the faint light of a single bulb flickering in the dark stairwell. The laugh echoed again, louder this time, coming from the basement. I hesitated for a moment before summoning my courage. The basement had always been unsettling, but I had to check. I descended the stairs, gripping the railing tightly. The basement was cold and musty, with a faint smell of mildew. The light bulb cast a weak, flickering glow, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I moved cautiously, the wooden steps creaking under my weight. The basement was filled with old furniture, dusty boxes, and various knickknacks from years past. The laugh came again, closer this time, and I could hear the sound of something shifting among the boxes. I scanned the room, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. I moved towards the source of the sound, a stack of old cardboard boxes. As I approached, the laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by an unsettling silence. My flashlight revealed nothing unusual, just old, forgotten items. I felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. I was about to turn away when I noticed a small, dusty mirror leaning against the wall. It was an antique, with an ornate, gilded frame. I shone the flashlight on it and saw a faint, blurry figure in the reflection. A small child, their face obscured by darkness. My heart raced as I turned to face the mirror, but there was no one there. The basement seemed empty, and the only sound was the hum of the flickering light bulb. I felt a growing sense of unease, as if something was watching me from the shadows. I picked up the mirror, examining it closely. The reflection was distorted and wavy, making it difficult to discern any details. I placed it back against the wall, trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. As I turned to leave, I heard the laugh again, this time accompanied by the soft sound of footsteps. The sound was coming from the far corner of the basement, where a large old trunk stood. The trunk was covered in a thick layer of dust, its lock rusted and ancient. I approached the trunk, my hands trembling. The laughter grew louder, almost as if it was coming from inside the trunk. I took a deep breath and lifted the heavy lid, revealing the contents. Inside the trunk was a jumble of old clothes, faded photographs, and various trinkets from the past. I sifted through the items, my flashlight revealing glimpses of forgotten memories. There was nothing unusual, just remnants of a bygone era. Among the items was an old, leather-bound journal. The cover was worn, and the pages were yellowed with age. I opened it cautiously, flipping through the entries. The journal belonged to someone named Emily, and it detailed everyday events from a time long past. I found a few sketches tucked between the pages, simple drawings of a young girl playing, her laughter depicted with crude, joyful lines. The drawings were charming, but they also made my skin crawl, especially in the context of the eerie laughter I had been hearing. The journal was filled with notes about a child's life and a family's history. As I read through it, I discovered that Emily had been a young girl who lived in the house many decades ago. The final entry was dated just before the family disappeared mysteriously, leaving the house abandoned for years. As I continued to read, the basement grew colder. The laughter resumed, more insistent and haunting. It seemed to be coming from everywhere, echoing off the walls. The shadows seemed to come alive, twisting and writhing in the dim light. I shut the journal and closed the trunk, my mind racing. The house was filled with echoes of the past, and the presence of Emily, or whatever had become of her, was palpable. I needed to get out of the basement, away from the unsettling atmosphere. I climbed the stairs quickly, my footsteps echoing in the dark. The laughter grew louder, almost as if it was following me. I reached the top of the stairs and slammed the basement door shut, locking it with a firm click. The house was silent once more, but the oppressive feeling lingered. I went back to the living room, trying to calm my racing heart. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, but the normalcy of the ticking only heightened my sense of unease. That night, I tried to sleep, but the laughter and the shadows haunted my dreams. I woke up in a cold sweat, the memory of the basement and the journal fresh in my mind. I knew I had to uncover the truth behind the laughter and the mysterious Emily. The next day, I visited the local library and researched the history of the house. I found old records and newspaper articles about the family that had lived there. The details were sparse, but it became clear that Emily and her family had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The house had been sold and abandoned, and the family's fate remained unknown. The more I learned, the more I realized that the house was linked to a dark and unresolved history. The laughter was not just a sound, it was a manifestation of the past, echoing through the walls and floors. That evening, I returned to the house, determined to confront the source of the haunting. Armed with the journal and a sense of resolve, I went back to the basement. The house was eerily quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. I unlocked the basement door and descended the stairs, the flickering light bulb casting ominous shadows. I approached the trunk and the mirror, trying to gather my courage. As I reached the trunk, the laughter began again, louder and more frantic. The shadows in the basement seemed to move, their forms twisting and shifting. I opened the trunk once more, hoping to find answers. The journal was gone. In its place was a small, handwritten note. "Help me." The words were scrawled in a hurried, frantic hand. My heart raced as I realized the note was a plea for help, a desperate cry from the past. The basement grew colder, and the laughter became a mournful wail. I could feel the presence of Emily's spirit, trapped between worlds, unable to find peace. I knew I had to do something to help her move on. I took the journal and the note and held them up to the mirror, the only thing that seemed to bridge the gap between the past and the present. As I did, the shadows swirled around the basement, and the laughter turned into a soft, sorrowful cry. I spoke softly to the shadows, trying to convey my empathy and understanding. Emily, I know you're here. I want to help you find peace. The shadows seemed to calm, and the laughter began to fade. The temperature in the basement warmed, and the oppressive feeling lifted. The mirror's surface grew clear, reflecting the light more brightly. The journal and the note were replaced by a single, delicate flower, a symbol of peace and release. I felt a sense of calm wash over me as the basement grew quiet once more. I left the basement, locking the door behind me. The house felt different now, lighter and more welcoming. The echoes of laughter were gone, replaced by a peaceful stillness. As I settled down for the night, I knew that the house had finally found closure. The shadows of the past had been laid to rest, and the laughter that had once haunted me was now a distant memory. The house on the outskirts of Forsyth was no longer a place of fear and darkness. It was a place of quiet solace, where the echoes of the past had finally been laid to rest. And as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that I had helped bring a forgotten spirit the tranquility it had longed for.
My name is Ethan Cole, and I have always lived a fairly normal life. I work as an IT consultant, which means my days are spent troubleshooting computer problems and navigating the tangled web of software issues. Routine is comforting, and that's why I was thrown off balance when I received the call about my great-uncle's house. Great-uncle Henry had been a reclusive figure in my life. I barely knew him, and I hadn't seen him in years. When he passed away, the house he left behind in the small town of Rosedale became my responsibility. It wasn't much, just a modest two-story home with an overgrown yard and a reputation for being creepy, as my childhood friends liked to joke. I had to drive out to Rosedale to sort through the estate. It was a long drive, and as I approached the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The property was surrounded by a tall iron fence, and the house itself looked forlorn, iced with broken shutters and a sagging roof. As I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, I was greeted by a heavy silence. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of old wood and mildew filled my nostrils. I took a deep breath and began to explore the house, hoping to find something of value among the cobwebs and faded wallpaper. The house was filled with old furniture, forgotten trinkets, and the detritus of a long, solitary life. It was clear that Great-Uncle Henry had lived a minimalist existence, leaving behind only the bare essentials. I spent hours sorting through the clutter, packing up items for donation or disposal. It was during my exploration of the basement that I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The basement door was old and wooden, with a heavy iron handle that seemed to have been polished more often than the rest of the house. I had initially avoided the basement, as the creaky, aged stairs and darkened space seemed foreboding. But curiosity got the better of me. I pried open the door and was greeted by a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The air was colder here, and the darkness seemed to absorb the faint light that came through the door. I grabbed a flashlight from my car and descended the stairs, feeling a twinge of anxiety. The basement was larger than I expected, with high ceilings and a large storage area filled with old crates and wooden shelves. The dim beam of my flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing dusty old boxes and forgotten belongings. The floor was concrete, and the walls were lined with cobwebs and mildew stains. As I moved through the basement, I found nothing particularly noteworthy, just more of the same old junk I had seen upstairs. However, there was one object that stood out, a large, ornate mirror covered by a white sheet in the corner of the room. I approached the mirror, intrigued by its elaborate frame. It was a stunning piece, with intricate carvings of leaves and vines, and the glass was still surprisingly clear despite the dust. I lifted the sheet, revealing the mirror's surface, and was taken aback by the faint reflection of a face in the glass. My own, but with an unsettling distortion. I frowned and set the sheet aside, examining the mirror more closely. The frame was made of an old, dark wood that seemed to have absorbed the years of dust and grime. There was something about the mirror that felt out of place, like it was a relic from another time. As I studied it, I noticed a peculiar inscription on the back of the frame, written in faded gold letters. It read, "For those who seek the truth." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I dismissed it as a quirky detail, but the mirror lingered in my mind as I continued to sort through the basement. That night, as I was preparing to leave the house, I heard a strange noise coming from the basement, a faint whispering, like a distant conversation or murmured chant. I hesitated, unsure whether to investigate or dismiss it as my imagination playing tricks on me. The whispering grew louder, and I could hear distinct words now, though they were muffled and indecipherable. My curiosity got the better of me, and I grabbed my flashlight once more, heading back down to the basement. The mirror stood there as I had left it, but now it seemed different, darker, more imposing. I approached it cautiously, and the whispering grew more intense, almost as if it was coming from inside the mirror itself. I leaned closer, trying to make out the words. The whispers were now a cacophony of voices, each overlapping the other. My heart raced, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The air in the basement grew colder, and the shadows seemed to writhe around the edges of the room. Suddenly, the whispering stopped, replaced by a loud crash from somewhere in the house. I jumped, startled, and turned to investigate. The sound had come from upstairs, and I rushed to see what had happened. When I reached the upstairs, everything seemed to be in order. There was no sign of any disturbance, and the house was eerily quiet once more. I checked each room, finding nothing amiss. The unsettling feeling lingered, but I couldn't pinpoint its source. I decided to leave the house for the night, locking up and heading back to my hotel. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, that the house had a presence that I couldn't ignore. The next day, I returned to the house with a sense of dread. I went back to the basement, determined to confront whatever was causing the strange occurrences. The mirror was still in the same spot, and the whispering had ceased. I decided to clean up the basement, hoping that tidying the space might provide some clarity. I moved the mirror, dusted off the cobwebs, and examined the items more closely. There was an old trunk in the corner that I hadn't noticed before. It was locked, with a rusted brass padlock securing it. I found a pair of old pliers in a tool chest and managed to pry open the padlock. Inside the trunk were old photographs, letters, and various artifacts from another era. Most of the items were mundane, but there was one photograph that caught my eye. The photograph was a black and white portrait of a family, a man, woman, and a young girl. They looked happy, but their expressions seemed oddly vacant, as if they were merely going through the motions of a photo. I noticed that the family bore a striking resemblance to Great Uncle Henry. Among the letters was one addressed to Henry from someone named Eleanor. The letter was filled with cryptic references to the truth and the mirror. It mentioned a secret that was to remain hidden, and I felt a growing sense of unease as I read the words. The letter concluded with a chilling statement. The mirror holds the truth, and the truth must be faced. Determined to uncover the truth, I went back to the mirror. I inspected it more closely, running my fingers over the ornate frame and examining the glass. The inscription on the back now seemed to take on a new significance. As I studied the mirror, I noticed something peculiar, a faint outline of a figure behind the glass. It was barely visible, but it appeared to be a shadowy shape, moving ever so slightly. My heart raced, and I felt an inexplicable urge to understand what lay within the mirror. I took the mirror outside, placing it in the sunlight to get a better view. The reflection was clearer now, and I saw that the figure in the mirror was indeed moving, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to be reaching out. I decided to confront whatever was in the mirror. I took a deep breath and spoke aloud. "What do you want from me?" The response was a soft, mournful whisper. "Help us, find the truth." The mirror's surface seemed to ripple, and the shadowy figure grew more defined. It was a ghostly face, with hollow eyes and a sad expression. I felt a wave of empathy and fear wash over me. I realized that the mirror was a conduit to something beyond, a reflection of a tragic past that had been buried and forgotten. The family in the photograph, the whispers, the shadowy figure, it all pointed to a hidden truth that needed to be revealed. I returned to the basement and examined the area around the mirror. There was something I had missed, an old, faded wallpaper with a strange pattern that seemed to cover a section of the wall. I carefully peeled back the wallpaper, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside the compartment was an old journal, bound in leather and weathered by time. I opened it cautiously, and the pages were filled with handwritten notes and sketches. The journal belonged to Eleanor, and it detailed a series of events that had taken place in the house. The journal revealed a tragic story. Eleanor had been a young woman who lived in the house with her family. They had discovered something unsettling about the mirror, a dark secret that had plagued them. The mirror was not just a reflection, but a portal to another realm, one filled with shadows and malevolent entities. Eleanor's entries described how the mirror had begun to influence their lives, causing fear and paranoia. The family had become estranged, and Eleanor had tried to find a way to destroy the mirror and break its hold. But her efforts had been in vain, and the family had vanished mysteriously. The final entry was a desperate plea. The mirror must be destroyed. Only then can we be free. With the knowledge of the mirror's dark history, I knew what I had to do. I gathered my courage and prepared to confront the malevolent force that had been haunting the house. I returned to the basement, where the mirror stood as a silent sentinel. I took a sledgehammer I found in the tool chest and approached the mirror, feeling a mix of dread and determination. As I raised the sledgehammer, the whispering began again, louder and more frantic. The shadows in the basement seemed to writhe and twist, as if trying to prevent me from carrying out my plan. I swung the sledgehammer with all my might, and the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound was deafening, and the shards of glass scattered across the basement floor. As the mirror broke, the shadows seemed to dissipate, and the whispering faded into silence. The basement was still once more. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, knowing that the mirror's dark influence had been broken. The house felt lighter, and the oppressive atmosphere was gone. In the days that followed, I completed the process of sorting through Great Uncle Henry's estate. The house was quieter, and the shadows that had once lingered seemed to have vanished. I packed up the remaining items and prepared the house for sale. As I prepared to leave Rosedale for the last time, I took one last look at the house. It was a place that had been haunted by secrets and shadows, but it was now free from the malevolent force that had plagued it. The mirror was gone, and with it, the echoes of the past had been laid to rest. I left Rosedale with a sense of closure, knowing that I had faced the darkness and uncovered the truth. The house would soon have new owners, and I hoped that they would find peace and solace in its walls. The basement, once a place of fear and mystery, was now just a room like any other. As I drove away, I looked back at the house one last time. The shadows had been banished, and the whispers of the past had finally been silenced. And with that thought, I continued on my journey, ready to embrace the future and leave the haunted past behind.
As the final echoes of the tale fade into the darkness, remember this: in the shadows where fear takes root, the true horror lies not in the creatures that lurk, but in the darkness within ourselves. We tell these stories not just to scare or entertain, but to confront the fears that we try so hard to ignore. So as you step back into the light of the real world, carry with you the lessons of the night. The monsters we create are reflections of our deepest anxieties, and the strength to overcome them is within each of us. Sleep well, and remember, in the realm of fear, we are the true masters of our fate. Good night, and may your dreams be free of shadows. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and click the notification bell for you to see my future update on this channel. Stay safe and always remember to lock your doors.